Hi.
Hello. Yeah, hi Ali, thank you. So I work for Julie's Bicycle, and we're a charity that has been around for 12, 13 years now, working with the arts and the creative industries on environment and climate issues.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a great charity, and I only heard of you guys maybe 2 years ago. My manager hooked us up, and we started working with you. And I guess I could talk a little bit about what we've been doing together, how Julie's Bicycle has helped me. So some things that I've been doing as an artist to reduce my environmental impact are, I guess the first step is just kind of considering your options and recognizing where there's room for change as an artist. And one of the main things that I guess you guys helped with is making a greener rider. So it's like the backstage food and everything that you ask for from a promoter, things that get prepared for you by someone who's not yourself. So you kind of lay out what you need and try and make it as eco-friendly as possible, really, and just the whole thing greener. So, for example, maybe 3-4 years ago, everyone in my band would be using like 3 or 4 plastic bottles of water a day, just like really going through it. And you notice after kind of 40 days on tour that's going to amount to, like, with a crew of like 10 people, that's 1,600 bottles of water, which you don't need to be thrown away. So as simple as everyone in the band getting their own reusable water bottle, so you have 10 bottles of water, and that's that for the whole tour. There's removing all the plastic packaging from the rider, so specifically asking for like the fresh produce not to come packaged, and no plastic forks and plastic plates. It's just unnecessary. And asking the venues to clean their backstage with eco-friendly products, which we can't guarantee that it'll actually get done, but I think it's important for them to see these questions on a rider and these suggestions, because I think it raises awareness for the way things can be done, and maybe eventually it'll get taken on board without request. And I think that's the hope.
You use the rider to open up the conversation, which is really brilliant to see you sort of take that on, because as you say, there's the things that you can do as a band, and then there's the other things that are really under the control of the venue or the festival. But you, as an artist, what you can do is you can put it on the agenda, you can bring it up, you can ask the questions.
There's further steps that I've taken outside of Julie's Bicycle, like with the company called Energy Revolution, who kind of help calculate your CO2 emissions, and from this information they'll create a figure in pounds that you can use to pay forward your emissions through kind of solar paneling or reforestation and stuff like that. So for example, my last 2 tours, I'd work out my personal CO2 emissions and pay that forward, essentially like taxing yourself for your CO2 usage or emissions, I guess.
That is exactly what it is. It's sort of because we know that, none of us are paying the price that we should be for the emissions that we create. And that's one of the reasons why climate change is an issue. So that is, that's a really powerful way for you to build that into your decision making as well, where you sort of figure, okay, well, I'm charging myself for this. This is the cost. What is the true cost of what I'm doing here? So that's really powerful, and especially paying it forward into, again, making these much bigger shifts around renewable energy and how do we shift away from fossil fuels.
Yeah, it's scary to see how much which we use once you start looking at the figures, and the more you start touring. And like I know Coldplay, for example, they didn't tour for the last album because they said until we can tour environmentally friendly completely, then we're just not going to tour, which is crazy because you think about the amount of emissions that happen from one of their shows, just like with like 80,000 people turning up at a stadium, all buying kind of single-use cup drinks and all driving there, and the band in their like tour bus and like 9 Arctic lorries, and the flights they had to get to that country. It's just ridiculous.
And this is why we want to imagine what the music industry could be like otherwise, isn't it? So the dream is that you'd have your venues powered by renewable energy. We would have a public transport system that works. We might be shifting the way that we put on shows anyway, so that we're working more with local audiences, traveling less far. Maybe we're touring a bit slower as well, so that, we don't have these crazy breakneck schedules that depend again on sort of everyone piling into trucks and buses and everything else. So do you want to say a little bit about what you've been doing around the merchandising and the vinyl?
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of the soft products like the t-shirts, and there's the vinyl. So with the soft products, we're kind of just trying to make it all as eco-friendly as possible, using organic and fair trade materials and water-based inks, so the solvents aren't harmful for the environment. And that's kind of quite simple step. And I use a company called I Dress Myself here in the UK, and a company called Ambient Inks in the US, who help with all that. They recommend every single garment and the right kind of inks, and I kind of trust them with that. And it's great to see more and more companies doing that. And with the vinyl, it's really interesting because I didn't know this existed, but when we sat down with our vinyl producer, Key, they suggested that we could do recycled vinyl. And what it is literally recycled vinyl pellets from like offcuts of vinyl that get remelted down and pressed into vinyl. So you can get this really cool, unique marbly effect, and each vinyl is completely unique. And it's kind of like, it took me back to being 10 years old and opening like a pack of Pokemon cards, hoping that I'd get like a really cool shiny card. And when I got my first batch of vinyl sent to me, I opened like 10 of them in a row. So I just wanted to see what they were like. And I think it's a really cool idea. And I think the fans really like that. And I think it was actually cheaper than choosing to go for like a marbled effect or something like that. And, of course, we made sure all the cardboard, it was FSC certified as well. And that's something which Key made sure. So the whole vinyl package is completely recycled. And there was an artist, I think Nick Mulvey, he made vinyl out of plastic taken directly from the sea. I don't know exactly how they did it, but if you look at the vinyl, you can see like the plastic in there.
It's like suspended in there, isn't it? It's really cool. It's sort of bringing the whole conversation of the object together with the issue. In the same way, I guess, that the way that you're making your vinyl out of recycled plastic, it sort of relates to some of the themes that you've looked at in your videos as well around ocean plastic and pollution, and kind of how those you link the story that you're telling with how you're running your career.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that it's kind of becoming an artistic thing. Using recycling has become artistic, like putting this kind of weird stuff into your vinyl, into your product. Like how people, I think Nike or someone, Adidas, maybe make shoes out of recycled ocean plastic as well.
But it sounds like the reactions tend to be really positive. And I mean, for you personally, what sort of set you onto this path? What was the point at which you went, actually, this is something that I really have to do something about?
See, I was raised just generally very mindful of the environment, thanks to my parents. And like when you start out as an artist, you kind of, it's hard to make any money from anywhere in the industry. And when you think about merchandising, you don't think about sustainability off the top of your head. Like, at least I didn't when I was younger, and now I do. So you kind of go for the cheaper options, and those don't tend to be the sustainable options. I think something switched in me maybe 3 years ago now, when I got pitched the Birthplace music video from the director Sil Yorick, which was the 30-meter whale made out of bamboo and plastic waste, suspended in the sea, that then eats the protagonist. And to see them doing something so artistic and poignant was incredible. And it's like, why aren't I doing more like this myself, kind of thing? And the video is too good not to say yes to. And I love the message of it. And I've always thought that once you remove yourself from the music and the videos, there's just like less room for ego and more room to kind of create a narrative or a story. And I think it just worked so well. And from that point, we were like, okay, well, we have to make sure everything is eco-friendly, because why wouldn't we? And I've kind of got to the point where I guess I can afford it a bit more now, so it's okay. But I've like I said, I've always been mindful of this stuff, and someone like David Attenborough has always been on my TV at home, kind of thing, and he's always been kind of going on about it. So it's been in my head.
He has been, hasn't he? But even then, sometimes it's like you need a tipping point somewhere else for that shift to really happen. It's like there's a name for it. It's called the Blue Planet 2 effect.
Okay.
After they did Blue Planet 2, and suddenly, environmental issues sort of really rose into a whole other place, I think, in everyone's consciousness again. But yeah, and that's, I guess, that's what we're all trying to do is build on that conversation in all the different ways, whether that is a video, whether that is a t-shirt that's made in a different way, whether that's a record that's made in a different way. And everyone is kind of contributing to this conversation about we need to do things differently because the way that we're doing them right now just isn't working out for anyone. Is there someone in the environmental or climate movement that really sort of inspires you or that you've been looking up to as you've been making decisions and thinking about these things?
And I probably would say someone obvious, and maybe I don't know if he's an activist, but like David Attenborough is obviously a dedicated naturalist and just an incredibly inspiring person through what he's done in his whole life. So I would say him, just because I've watched him since I was younger, and my parents and family have always been into his messages and what he stands for. And that Blue Planet 2 movement, like you said, really, I think, did kickstart it in me as well. And I kind of wish it happened a bit sooner. But it was funny because my dad phoned me like during like the new Blue Planets had come out, and he was like, "Oh, it'd be great for you to do a music video where you can highlight the amount of plastic in the oceans." And I was like, "Yeah, no, that would be really good. I mean, but it's reliant on who pitches us what." And literally a couple of days later, we got this pitch, and I was like, "This is perfect."
That's amazing.
Really happy to be able to go back to my dad and say, "Look, we're actually going to do this." Yeah.
And that video took on a bit of a life of its own at one point, didn't it, in terms of where it ended up and being used as an educational tool, and again, sort of really tapping into I guess, a story that we all wanted to know more about.
It was quite surreal for me, actually, because I got a message from my year 6 teacher. So what, I was like 9 or less in her class, and she was like, I heard this song and I watched the video and it blew me away. And then I noticed that it was you, and you went to this school and I was your teacher, 20 odd years ago. And I've been showing this video to my classes, and we're starting a project where we all go and like pick rubbish and turn it into like a massive whale and stuff like this. And so I went back to my school and I kind of met all the kids and like did a little talk about the environment and what I know of it, and kind of how great it is that my school is now teaching this kind of stuff at that young age. Because when I was in school, and I'm sure when you're in school at that age, they didn't really teach you about the environment that much. And they started this movement where my town is at the head of the River Severn, which is like a big river in the UK. And the plan is for them to pick up all the rubbish from the side of the river at the source to make sure nothing goes down to the next town, so that every town down the River Severn would then remove everything from their towns in the river. So by the time it reaches the ocean, nothing ends up in the ocean. So all the kids got involved, and it was just, I don't know, all very wholesome and a lovely thing to see, and nice to know that my music inspired them in some way. It was kind of awkward though, because I went there and she played the music video to the kids and made them all sing along back at me.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, it's been great to see what my contribution as an artist has changed, I guess. And I mean, what can artists do? What would you suggest?
I think, as an artist, again, it's about looking at where you are at that moment and then seeing yourself as the middle of a web of influences, I guess. And so the first one is, as you've done, sort of quite the practical steps. It's looking at your merchandise. It's looking at when you're on the road, what can you do? What conversations can you have with the venues and the festivals that you're playing at? And then it is looking at your creativity and how this comes through in your work, which is not to say that, everyone should be making climate or environment themed songs, because that's not your job. Your job is to be an artist. But it is looking at how, I guess, you can use so much of the climate and the ecological crisis as fuel for your creativity as well, as sort of as a starting point, when it becomes present to you, how it starts coming through in your work and every decision that you make, whether that is a creative decision, whether it's a business decision. And then I think it's recognizing how your work stretches all the way from, again, the story that you tell or how you use your voice to how you're practically doing things, and how they all relate. And I guess the other thing as an artist, it can feel quite difficult to step out there and overcome the fear of, being called a hypocrite, because we are all part of this industry that does hugely depend on touring and moving people and gear and stuff and artists around. And I think the most important thing is to stay true to what you want to say within that, and that we're all part of the system that isn't working very well within our planet's life support sort of system and boundaries. And so it is up to all of us to step outside that and go, okay, yes, we know that we're all part of the problem, but that doesn't mean that we can't speak on it.
Yeah, I get that. And what you said about, I guess you can feel guilt about it sometimes. And I totally understand that. Like, I'll see videos and pictures of me playing shows from like 5 years ago, and there'll be like a plastic water bottle in my hand. And I'll be like, I can't use this video or this picture now because I don't want to look like a hypocrite, and I also don't want to present the image of a musician holding a plastic bottle on stage.
And that is like, it's shifting what we accept as normal. And that's the thing. Sometimes there's this big debate about, all of us could shift to reusable bottles tomorrow, and actually we wouldn't have solved climate change because we also need action at a political level. But it's how all of those things relate together. So when you send the signal that actually it's not okay to be holding a plastic bottle, then you link straight into the story that, changes a politician's sort of policy tomorrow. They've done this great study around solar panels on houses, and how a lot of it is also about peer pressure. So if you put a solar panel on one house in a neighborhood, suddenly the surrounding houses are that much more likely to also put solar panels on. So it really does ripple out from a single person doing something differently. And I guess what we're all working towards is creating a movement that's big enough to then shift at a political level. And I think that's what I would say to, any of your fans as well, is sort of, you can do things in your everyday, and that might be, trying to be less wasteful. But the other really important thing is also to use your voice as a citizen and a voter when you can. So making sure that you are registered to vote, making sure that you do go out there and let your representatives know that the climate and the environment is something that you care about.
Yeah, that's true. And it's kind of tough as an artist because you want to get the point across, but you don't want to come across as like really trying to knocking it into people and getting this. You don't want to stir a feeling of guilt in people too much. This is what I was kind of worried about. If I was talking about it too much, people would be like, "Oh, he's on about it again." And we know we've seen these posts, we've read your like statements and stuff. But I think people don't care as much as I was thinking. I think people want to know that other people are doing something proactive. So I guess you don't have to talk about it, but I think, like you said, you can do small things at home which make a big difference. And like the fact that people have stopped using single-use water bottles, you've seen this like uproar of new like reusable water bottles that all branded loads of different like types, and I guess it's a good thing. Loads of brands coming out with this type of stuff. So it's becoming commercially viable, I think, because I think the financial side of it is what's stopping a lot of people. Yeah.
It is, and I guess, again, and that's why it's so important that when we're doing things individually, we are also trying to shift, again, the bigger picture that maybe we can't control directly, but, because say when you're touring to a venue, again, you can control whether you're using your single-use water bottles, but you don't know how that venue's powered. But when you make that point to the venue and maybe they switch to renewable energy, then every artist who comes through that venue benefits from the fact that they've shifted to renewable energy. And so again, it's how we turn those little actions into much bigger actions, and in the end, we can hopefully change the whole world in the way that it works together. And it falls on us, I guess, who are in a position to make some of these changes, to push for them, so that people who are maybe not in a position to to make those changes themselves, whether they're financially not in a position to, whether, you know, they don't have the same kind of voice to make those changes or to get heard, can benefit as well.
Yeah. And like we spoke about what Nick Mulvey done with his vinyl. Is there any other artists that you know of who have done kind of quite interesting things with this stuff?
Yeah, different artists kind of find their own way of expressing it. I mean, you have sort of some big names, like you have Ellie Goulding, who will go out there and she'll be an ambassador for climate change, you know, at the UN, or speaking to politicians about it as an issue. Or you have, there are some musicians who are working with an NGO in the US who've started a big campaign called No More Bloodwood, which really looks at where the wood that our instruments are made from comes from, and, you know, campaigns against illegal logging for especially some of the rare woods that end up in certain types of guitar or other instruments. Or, you know, you'll get artists like Anony kind of going out and again really fronting with things like 4 Degrees, which are really protest songs. Or now you've got Massive Attack really working with the Tyndall Centre to do some in-depth research around the carbon impact of touring. So it's sort of, I think every artist finds a way and a conversation and an in that works for you and that feels authentic. And when you start looking, it's amazing kind of all the stories that start coming out, and it does really feel like there's a whole movement of artists all doing different things.
Yeah, I think it's inspiring to hear that stuff. I think maybe that side of things should be spoken about more, like what other artists are doing, because, you know, these are people that, you know, everyday people idolize and want to kind of emulate. Like I think it was Massive Attack. They did a tour by train recently or something like that.
I think they're going to do one by train, yeah, which is brilliant. Or there was also the thing that the 1975 did with their merch. So they had loads of overstock merch from a previous tour, and they did screen printing over it with a new design.
Oh, cool.
I think at one of the festivals last year. So you start building up, and I think one of the first bands to really set some of this stuff in motion was Radiohead, more than 10 years ago. And they really tried to do a large scale tour that was as sustainable as possible, which went all the way to, like, they worked with one of the lighting companies to design and create and make a whole new LED type stage lighting fixture that didn't exist before that. So it's sort of how you use your place and where you are in the whole ecosystem of the music industry to push others to make changes and to make stuff happen for you and with you as well.
Would you say, what as like someone going to a show, like a fan, what would you say to something practical that they can do to help?
I think one of the main things is, if you can, take public transport to a show, especially here in the UK. Transport now makes up the biggest sort of portion of our carbon emissions as a country. And whenever we've looked at the carbon footprint of different shows and concerts, audience travel is always a really big part of that, especially if you're traveling to like a festival or, you know, a venue that's a bit out of town. And so if you can use public transport, or if you're going to a festival, if you can use the coach services or the train, or, you know, at least car share, then that's a really big difference that you can make. I think, again, outside the show itself, making sure that you do vote and you do kind of show, especially the people who are making political decisions, that the climate is something that you care about. And then, you know, I think also supporting artists. If you care about climate change, if you care about environmental issues, and an artist who you support does something, you know, tell them that you think it's a great idea and give them your support, especially if and when it opens up a bigger conversation, you know, on social media and everything else, again, around hypocrisy and everything else. Make sure that the artists know that you're with them.
Yeah, sure. And something that doesn't get talked about as much, and I think maybe people don't like the idea of bringing it up as much, is like the dairy and meat industry, how much that causes negativity towards the environment, all the CO2 emissions from the farming and all that. And like, well, I guess we haven't spoken about it, but I mean, I've been vegetarian kind of my whole life pretty much. And, I spent some time vegan, but it was a hard thing to grab onto and stay onto, really. But I don't know, do you guys really kind of push that agenda as well? Or do you feel uncomfortable telling people what to eat? Is that kind of too far?
It's an interesting one because, as you say, food is so emotive, and it comes with so many cultural links as well. I think what we don't tend to tell artists what they should or shouldn't be eating, but we do work a lot with festivals and venues, for example, suggesting that they should have more vegetarian and vegan options on their menu, or if they feel confident enough to go vegetarian and vegan in what they make available through, on-site restaurants and traders. So like when Julie's Bicycle, when we run our events, the catering is always either fully vegan or it's half vegan and half vegetarian. And we've been doing that for years and years because in some ways it's about getting people to try out something. And if you make the environmentally better or less impactful thing, the default, then you can make a much bigger change. And there are, and it's a real opportunity, I think, to make a shift that's bigger than just us in the arts and creative industries. So one of my favorite stories is Shambhala Festival, which went meat and fish free back in, I think in 2016 or 17. And they were quite nervous about it because it can be it can be such an emotional conversation. People do tend to say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're taking away my choice, my freedom of choice of what I want to eat." And they sort of said, we're doing this because we're a festival that really cares about the environment, and so we want to open up that conversation. And they did all kinds of follow-up surveys with their audience, and the majority of the audience said, this was great, actually. Can we keep the festival meat and fish free? And then also they do follow-up surveys. And out of the people who weren't already vegetarian and vegan, I can't remember how many, but it was something like a third said that they'd actually reduced how much meat they ate after the festival because of the sort of conversation that had been opened up. So that's really powerful.
That's great. And I see the world going that way, but I don't know if that's the bubble I'm in, because I know meat consumption, especially in America, is still rising. So it doesn't seem like it actually is going that way. But to me, it does. Maybe that's just the people I surround myself with. And
I think around the world it's rising, especially in countries where traditionally, there not as much meat has been eaten. And so countries that are getting richer. And so where we want to get to at the moment is way too much meat gets eaten in the UK and most countries in Europe and in the US. And there is a real need to reduce that, both because of the carbon emissions from the meat, sort of from the agriculture itself, but also the amount of land that it takes up, that we want to have to plant trees on instead, really.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, I think it's good to touch on that. So go vegetarian.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me, Chiara. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And yeah, if you do speak to any other artists or venues or festivals who are looking for advice, send them our way. All right.